Okay. All right, let's do it. Everyone, welcome to Perfect Pairings Volume 9. That's right. This is the 9th in our series that started at the beginning, well, not the beginning of the pandemic. We started in July. So when March hit and everything closed down, we had a few months of just nothing. But this is our ninth event. I start all of these by saying I mean this with all of my heart. It really is a total honor to be here with all of you to do these events. This is absolutely a hobby. Many of you know with our in-person events, I'm not really the guy that's doing this. It's myself, Dave, who was just speaking to you, Kelvin, Kevin and Christian, who do blind reviews for our website as well. So it's a family of people that really cares about advancing cigar culture and whiskey culture here in New York City, and then more broadly in the rest of the country. So it's just a pleasure to have you here, and especially big thanks to our sponsors, Camacho, Arran as well, and also Big Buddha Cigar Lounge. I am not outside freezing my ass off like last time. Thankfully, I'm actually in a beautiful lounge. I've got a roaring fire behind me, which you might be able to see. So if you're in Connecticut, anywhere near Newtown, and you want a membership here, let me know. I can get you a pretty cool deal. But welcome. It's going to be a good evening. For those of you who this is your first time, I know we have some newcomers. The way that this event works is we try to keep it interesting, as interesting as we can keep it. It's not generally very hard, given that we're smoking cigars and drinking whiskey. But the way that we do that is by, you're going to hear from the brand ambassadors about the products, but we're also going to be doing some Q&A with the ambassadors as well. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. I have a few questions prepared for each of the ambassadors, but please drop your questions in the chat, or you can come off mute and just shout your question out. But as Dave mentioned, please do just be sure to remute yourself. Because background noise is shared with absolutely everyone, and we just want to be mindful of that. So with that being said, let's see if I can switch here. So here are your hosts for the evening. Obviously, I'm one of them. Definitely look a lot better in that picture than I do in real life, but life isn't fair. We've got George Rami here of Camacho, who you've probably all seen on social media. And Marielle, I actually can't see your last name because of Zoom, Romano, who actually joined today. I was notified that she was going to be able to make it today, which is just fantastic. So I've become a massive fan of this whiskey over the last, I would say, 6 weeks since beginning to kind of plan this event and buying some bottles for myself to try. So I cannot wait to ask lots of questions. And I hope that you can't wait to ask questions either. These are the cigars that we're smoking this evening. We've got Camacho Nicaragua and Corojo. I will just give a brief description of why I selected these cigars and kind of what the thought process there was. I've been a Camacho fan for a long time. As many of you know, they make just phenomenal product. They were acquired by Davidoff from being a private company. I actually don't know when. It's been at least a decade at this point. So maybe George can. Oh yeah, over. But we'll get it. Yeah. What is it, like 15 years? It's 2008. So 2008. Okay, so like 14 years. Yeah. But they just make impeccable product, and you know the brand had sort of fallen out of my regular rotation until they released Nicaragua in 2020. Was it 2020? July 2020. July of 2020. And I was blown away by the crazy amount of complexity with this cigar. You can see there on the blend details, it's actually, it only has Nicaraguan tobacco in the filler. which I'm sure George hears about all the time. Why did you name it Nicaragua if it's not a Nicaraguan Puro? But you can tell us a little bit about that as well.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the cigar. And then we've got Corojo as well, which is really what, as far as I understand it, it's kind of what landed Camacho on the map in terms of its kind of uniqueness as a brand. I first encountered them prior to their acquisition by Davidoff at Nat Sherman. But definitely a little bit stronger than Nicaragua, more, this is my opinion, but more spice, a bit more assertive, aggressive. And that's why it's really a good follow-up to Nicaragua, which I think is, I as much as it's a medium bodied cigar, I think that it's just extremely complex. And both of these pair very well with the whiskeys. I know that, at least for myself, I know that from my own personal experimentation. So, and then we've got Arran. I tried to pack, it's hard to put 6 expressions onto one slide. So I want to give a shout out to Eileen. I don't know if Eileen's on this call right now, but she, we initially settled on the 5 expressions, and then she said, you know what the hell, let's throw Robert Burns in there as well, because tonight is Burns night, which Marielle, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about that in just a couple of minutes. But Eileen, thank you so much for your generosity here. I'll say thank you on behalf of the group. $60 to be able to smoke great cigars and sample almost everything from a single distillery is it's incredible. And so thank you.
Thanks guys for having me. I apologize to those of you who unfortunately got broken bottles. I promise to make it up for you, up to you, but I am really excited to share the line and learn more about Arran. So thanks for having me.
Excellent. So just a couple of quick suggestions, actually really just one suggestion. I say this every time, I apologize everyone, but it really is the difference between kind of getting it and not getting it. This is just my opinion. I think it's true, but it is my opinion. And that is that when we're pairing cigars and spirits, order of operations is really important. So I strongly suggest beginning with a sip and then a smoke, not the other way around. You really want the liquid to have coated your palate. And when you take that sip, don't cleanse your palate. So don't use your tongue to clean the liquid out of your mouth after you've swallowed. Allow it to sort of linger there and then take a couple of puffs on the cigar. That's when you'll sort of get that alchemical sort of reaction where the notes that are evident in the cigar and in the smoke and in the liquid, where that process will kind of happen. So that's just always something that I like to remind people about. So with that being said, we are going to be starting with the barrel reserve. We're going to go from there to Robert Burns. And so Marielle, I'd love for you to tell us about both of those expressions, if you could do it in about 10, 15 minutes. Also tell us about Arran, because it's a brand that I had seen in cigar lounges, or sorry, in spirit shops before. And then it just seems like, especially with the 10-year, there's just been all of this chitter chatter about that. And obviously Ralphie named it his #1 whiskey of the year, which I actually sent that link out to everyone this morning to watch. I don't know if any of you watched it, but he really is a poet. He has an incredible way with words. And, and then I'll say this and then I'll shut up, because I know that I'm taking up a lot of space here. But what I thought was so cool about what he described in his discussion of why he named a 10-year whiskey his whiskey of the year, he really, a lot of what he talked about was focused on how he could sense the commitment to the wood, to the quality of the wood in sipping a 10-year. And that commitment that isn't always the case with other distilleries, and it really shows. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, read it or listen to it after tonight sometime, and then subscribe to Ralphie's channel, because he's just a really fun guy to listen to talk about whiskey. But that being said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Marielle, I'm going to kick it over to you. Tell us about Arran, and then the Barrel Reserve and Robert Burns.
Absolutely. First of all, big shout out to Ralphie as well. I absolutely love the man. And what a huge endorsement. I mean, we didn't expect it at all. It does rate a lot of different whiskeys, but yeah, for the exact same reason that you said, it was even the better, like, you know, even better to get an endorsement from him just because of how we treat whiskey, how we make whiskey, and, you know, our values as a company, which for us is a small independent company, are, you know, essentially the most important thing. So I might just give you a very quick overview on Isle of Arran Distillers as a company so that we all are on the same page, and then I'll cover the whiskeys as we go along, like during the tasting as well. So first thing you need to know is something that we just shout from the rooftops is the fact that obviously we are independent and we are super proud. I mean, anyone can see, especially here in the Scottish market, more and more distilleries are acquired. There are huge multinationals and like corporate companies that just focus on releasing whiskeys to make money and, like, you know, to make money fast, while it's super refreshing to be able to work for a company which is steadily growing, but is still very much focused on, you know, grain to glass, quality over quantity. We do everything small, we take our time, we're very traditional, despite being super young. That's one of the things that a lot of people don't know if they're not been following the whiskey industry for quite some time, but we're actually like the teenagers of the whiskey industry at the moment, because we managed to open a distillery in 95, which I say managed because I don't want to go into too geeky information. I don't know if you're into, like, you know, collecting whiskeys or old distilleries, but just to give you an overview, if you ever hear talking about the big closed guys, like, let's be, like, you know, like talking about Rosebank or Portellen or Brora, these are all distilleries that shut down in the 80s. Like, there was literally a decline in whiskey demand, like distilleries were very much closing down, blends were producing, but single malt was definitely not asked in bars at the time. And to be even more precise, in 93, P.T. Wake Distillery, famous Diageo close distillery, shut down. In 94, Little Mill Distillery, a very famous lowland distillery, shut down. And our founder, Harold Curry, decided to buy land in 93, build a distillery in 94, and produce spirit in 95. Crazy pioneer, we don't know, like crazy for sure, because we had to go through a lot of challenges throughout the years. It wasn't easy, obviously, producing whiskey independently at a very small scale and survive until today, but also pioneer because we went ahead of the market. Now there are new distilleries popping up every weekend, while we can enjoy an 18-year-old, which is possibly made with some of the oldest casks we have in our warehouse. So when you try the 18-year-old tonight, super lucky that you get to try it. It's not something that I use often in my tasting because obviously super limited. Just think about the fact that these are the first casks that we ever filled, and we were on survival mode. Like, we literally filled every possible cask that we could, put it in a warehouse. We didn't even have a warehouse ourselves. We had to ship it overseas, and only now we're like finally taking them back. So it's amazing that we're still here today. We're still independent, and now we actually have 2 distilleries on the Isle of Arran, which is fantastic. So Isle of Arran, I don't know if you've ever been, but if you ever find yourself in Scotland, especially here in Glasgow, it's super easy to get to. I highly recommend that. It's one of the most beautiful islands you could possibly visit on Arran. If you're into hiking, like kayaking, bird watching, climbing, food, beer, cheese, gin, chocolate, everything made in house, like a super strong community, and obviously a lot of whiskey. I mean, that's a given. I highly recommend you visiting. And obviously I highly recommend you visiting our distilleries because they're super different from each other. Locranza Distillery, which is the one that produces the Arran whiskey that you're drinking right now, is very small and traditional, while Light Distillery is massive and super modern and is focused on heavily peated whiskey. So if you're into your Islay whiskeys, you should visit definitely both to compare the two. In terms of what we do, I said it before, quality over quantity. We do a slow fermentation that goes from 50 to 110 hours, and we do one of the slowest distillations in the industry. That's all really you need to grasp from how we make our whiskeys, because we do make it with a lot of patience and a lot of time, which means that if we wanted to work 24 hours a day, like every day of the year, we could make around 1 million to 100,000 liters of whiskey, and, like, you know, try to push out as much spirits as possible. to this day, we make less than half than that because we take our time and because we want our whiskey to be as good as it gets. Same thing goes for our wood policy, as Matthias mentioned before. Since 2007, we had a brand new master distiller called James McTaggart, which unfortunately decided to retire last year. So unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. But still, he kind of revolutionized our company. And our wood policy now is as strict as possible. We only use the freshest casks that we can get. So if you hear me talking about casks, like for the whiskeys that you're going to try right now, and I don't specify like the type of refill, I'm either talking about first fill, I'm talking about second fill, and that is it. We don't do any third, we don't do any fourth. We cut the casks enough, we use them as planter, we put some flowers in it, or we just sell it to locals. We don't use old casks because we truly believe that a good quality spirit with time and patience and care and very good quality wood will make a good quality whiskey. So we highly believe in that. Obviously, being independent allows us to bottle the whiskey the way we want to. So most of the whiskeys you'll try tonight are non-filtered, and all of the whiskeys you'll try tonight are non-colored. So we try to give you a transparent, honest, good quality product. And now that we're growing after 26 years, we obviously try to share it, in the world. I think we changed distribution very recently in the UK. So now we're with Hoteling & Con, which is beautiful because it means that we get to do more activities in the US as well. And it's great to see our bottles over there as well. So thank you, by the way, for giving me the opportunity to talk to you tonight. But first things first, tonight is the 25th. Not for you. For me, it's the 26th. For you, it's still the 25th of January. So it is Burns night, after all. I don't know if you celebrated with the haggis. I won't do any poems. My Scots is absolutely horrible. I won't even try. I already have a weird Scottish-Italian thing going on here, which is already weird on its own. So I won't do any poems. But I'll just tell you about the man himself, Robert Burns, obviously. I have the bottle right here. That's what I've been drinking tonight. I'm sorry, it's not really showing. But anyway, you get the gist. You know how Robert Burns looks like anyway. So Robert Burns, obviously from Alloway, which is just on the other side of Arran. So he literally looked at Arran, like as he was growing up all his life, because it's literally on the Ayrshire coast. So we decided to pay an homage to the man. It is our national bard. It is, the most famous Scottish poet and Scottish person of all times. But it's also, globally renowned. Everybody is everybody in the music and the art industry has been inspired at some level or at some point in their lives by the works of Robert Burns. So the 25th of January is the opportunity for us to get together, wear kilts, have a lot of whiskeys, sing his poems, drink all the Scottish drinks, have some haggis, and obviously celebrate, being proud, being Scottish, and obviously the man himself, Robert Burns. So that's the idea behind this whiskey as well. We wanted to produce a whiskey that was a crowd pleaser. It was the perfect whiskey for sharing. It's a bottle that you take to a Burns night and you share with family, loved ones, friends, and whoever it is at the Burns night. So it's easier to drink compared to the other ones. It's bottled at 43% instead of our classic 46%. So it's a little bit lighter. It is non-colored, and it is essentially 100% bourbon matured whiskey for 6-7 years. And 20% of those casks are finished in first fill sherry, which are very, very powerful. Oloroso sherry, so quite fresh. So you have a balance of the two. So you do get the sweetness and the vanilla and all the lovely things from the bourbon cask, but you also get a little bit of the darker tones from the sherry cask. In contrast, the Barrel Reserve, which is the one that I think you're drinking now, it is, I call it the aperitivo of the range. It is super entry-level, beautiful breakfast whiskey, if there was such a thing. Very light, very gentle, very easy to taste, very easy to enjoy. Good for mixing if you're into your, cocktails, or if you're into cooking with whiskey. That's what I do a lot. But even if you're just looking for a very good quality, easy dram that you can enjoy if you had a bad day, if you had a good day, if you wanted to share it with the friends, it's just a very easy Arran whiskey, which introduces you to the range in a very good way because it's 100% bourbon cask matured. There's no sherry, so you can get the character of Arran whiskey straight away without any other cask, taking over that character. So the character of Arran can shine very freely in those bourbon casks. Again, it's around 6-7 years old. Again, is 100% non-colored, and it is bottled at 43% for easement of enjoyment again. So these are the two first whiskeys of the night.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you.
No worries. I might go and have a look at all the comments.
Yeah, you're gonna have to scroll quite a bit. Yeah, so George, while Marielle is looking at the comments, George, can you give us an brief intro to yourself, to Camacho, the brand, and Nicaragua?
Sure. So everybody, Matthias already introduced me a little while ago. My name is George Rami. I am the brand ambassador for Camacho. I joined the Davidoff team back in 2012, and I was the last piece of the rebranding of Camacho. But prior to that, I've been in the industry for about 18 years now. And I used to have a retail store in Miami, and I would carry Camacho, right, with the old branding. If some of you guys have smoked it before, you remember that it didn't look how it looks now, right? But let's go back to when Camacho pretty much started here in the US, as Matthias kind of touched base into that. So back in the year, actually started and through my travels, I found that out that it started in New Hampshire in 1999. There was a test store there, and it ran for about a year when it officially got introduced into the US in the year 2000. All cigars at the time were mild to medium. This is right after the boom. So Camacho came with this bold attitude in terms of flavor profile, right? Because they had the Corojo that had been, seeds had been smuggled from the 60s in Honduras and have been grown ever since there. And they introduced it in the US with the Camacho Corojo, which is the one that we're going to smoke after. That one is, as Matthias was kind of explaining, which we'll taste in a little bit, very spicy, very, full frontal flavor, we call it, right? And that was the first one that pretty much, launched the brand here. And it kind of, it was disruptor of the status quo, right? Because everything else that was going on was mild to medium for the most part. And that's what pretty much, the industry was about. And then Camacho came in and, it took off from there up until the year 2008, which we kind of touched base on that. Davidoff acquired the brand and the factory. And it was the transition between the old owners into the new pretty much company, right? Because Davidoff has evolved since then as well. But to the previous team that was in charge of that, pretty much it was a good 3 to 4 years of just running, changing, tweaking a couple of things here and there in the brand, but always keeping what was there before. And in the year 2013, June 2013, actually, we revamped the whole brand, right? We changed the identity of Camacho, giving it a new, refresh, bold look, a little bit more up to date. Also, we introduced the color scheme that we have, which at the time, everybody, we had some very critical feedback from consumers and retailers and all that stuff. People were like, oh my God, the colors, blah, blah, blah. And later on, as you probably have seen, in humidors around the country now, it's full of colors now, right? So we kind of did something right there. And so that's kind of like how the brand started to evolve, right? And I joined the team. Like I said, I was the last puzzle of that. I had a store in Miami, and then I wanted to do something on my own. And within pretty much, and actually this is fresh because I talked about it. We had some job interviews today. Within 3 weeks to a month, Dylan Austin, which is our current president right now of Davidoff, he called me. He's like, hey, I have something for Camacho. I'm like, well, yeah, I had no clue that the revamp was about to happen, right? And I used to have Camacho in my store. I'm like, sure, maybe I'll take a trip, get some Davidoffs out of the trip. And when they showed me what Camacho was going to look like and what I was going to be a part of, right, it kind of changed my perspective completely, right? And I that same day I joined the team, and it's been I'm almost in a couple of months of I would be there for 9 years, right? Being the face of the brand, and I've done a series of things through the brand, right? One of the most notable ones could be the 3 years that I was on the road doing the 3 national road tours. So I've been through 44, 45 different states driving. We had a big truck and trailer. We're doing activations with motorcycles inside. Very bold, very, some people called it crazy, but it was a fun time. I got to see a lot of the country, a lot of the cigar stores, everything, because it's one thing flying there, but if you're driving through, you get to experience something that you just can't not really, grasp while you're just flying in there and then flying out, right? And then later on, well, we'll get to the to a little bit more in the Q&A, but what we're smoking now is the Camacho Nicaragua, right? And we launched this one in the year 2020, July 2020, and it had been in the works for about almost 2 years prior, right? And I recall that freshly because we were at the trade show in Vegas, and they gave us some samples, right? And then since that moment, we tried these samples, and it was we were all in awe of the flavor profile, right, and how it would fit in our small portfolio of core lines, right? Because as you probably have seen, we do come out with one limited edition here, and we had for 19 years we had the Liberties and all that stuff, but it's just that we don't come out with like new stuff every year, right? Or multiples every year. If anything, one. So this one is part of the core line, which includes, your Criollo, Ecuador, Connecticut, Corojo, and the Nicaragua, right?
And
so
George, I'm going to cut you off there and just say that, and I've said this on a number of different perfect pairings, but that's something that I actually really respect, not coming with 15 new blends every year. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that, although I have some issues with it, but I think that I have a more respect for the brands that work on maintaining a near perfect product than the companies that release 10 new blends and they're great when you smoke them the first time and they get great ratings, and then you smoke them like a year later or 2 years later and you're like, what is this shit? Like
that was my next point, right? So we're part of Davidoff, right? And the prestige of our main brand is Davidoff, right? So everything, all of our quality, production, every single little detail is the same that we use to, kind of nurture the Davidoff tobacco, right? So we use the same techniques in Honduras, everything. We actually, the head of the factory in Honduras is like 25, well, he's 29-year veteran at Davidoff now, that's been managing, so just kind of like overseeing the entire factory, or general manager, Manuel Batista. So going back to the core, right? So we want to make sure that just like when you pick up a Davidoff anywhere in the world, it'll taste the same for years to come. Right? We have lines that have been, around for 20 plus years. They taste exactly the same. That's what we want for Camacho, right? And that's why we just we cannot afford to come out with new cigars, because we just don't know if we have enough tobacco to keep up with that, right? And like Matteo was saying, it's like, yeah, you slap the same label on it, but, crops change. You have to make sure you have enough tobacco to create it for, to make the cigars for, I don't know, 5-10 years or whatever. But at least we have anywhere from 3 to 5 years of the same tobacco for this line for 3 to 5 years to come, right? So that's kind of like as always, crops change, so we try to kind of tweak the blend a little bit to where it's exactly the same flavor profile, so you guys can enjoy that same cigar. And if it's part of your household name type of thing, that is just like, that is the one that has to be in my humidor, you want that same flavor, right? And that's pretty much what we're looking for, right? So this is the last addition to the puzzle. Also, we have the other one that we had it's fantastic as well, is the Camacho Factory Unleashed. That was a limited edition for last year. Excellent cigar. That is not part of the core line yet, but I mean, it probably would deserve a spot, right? But we'll see what happens in the future. But for now, this is the one this is the new kid on the block, right? And also has this kind of like burnt orange color as well, to try to distinguish it a little bit from the rest, right? The closest one would probably be the Corojo and maybe a little bit of the Connecticut. But I hope you guys are enjoying it right now. We'll get into the pairings. I already had the first barrel reserve, excellent. I'm sipping on the second one, and I'm trying to stop here and then try to go back and see how the flavor profiles affected. But this one, it's comes in 3 sizes. Right, Robusto, Toro, and it's like it's a Churchill, right? But it's let me give you the exact same size of that one, because that's the one that I'm a little scared of, because it's what is it? It's 7 by 48. That's
okay.
That's interesting. Seems a little bit bigger than that. I would have to check that. I'm just grabbing this from a website. But 3 sizes eventually, and why 3 sizes? That is the other thing that that some of our lines that have been around for a while have had different sizes. But again, you know, we try to focus on the core and make the core very strong. And as you probably know, some sizes don't really sell that much. So we try to focus on the 3 size. When we release something, same thing happened with the Camacho American Barrel Age. We released it in 3 sizes, right? Robusto, Toro, and Gordo. Those are the 3 best-selling sizes of in the industry. This one we tried the Churchill, and it's actually a 7 by 54. I would have to double check that. And 3 sizes to see if you know it does well in the market, which it has. Then we'll venture off into possibly a torpedo or you know something a little bit different to try to, you know, cater to everybody that likes their different vitolas, right? But for now, this has been a very strong cigar for us. Unfortunately, it was kind of launched in the middle of the pandemic, right? So we did have a little bit of issues. So our forecasts were to sell X. We sold 3 times that, but we didn't have the boxes and the raw materials to produce all this stuff. So it was kind of like a you know, but there was nothing we could do. Now we're back to normal. But yeah, it was launched in a very you know, testing time to launch a brand new product, right? July 2020. Jeez.
Yeah. So I think one of the interesting things for me, and then we'll go back to Marielle for some interview questions. But I think what's fascinating to me about Nicaragua, and this is, I feel like that Davidoff Nicaragua is similar in the sense that a few years ago, there was this giant mad rush to create the, you know, brand X Nicaragua. It was just like what all the brands were doing. And it seemed like the sort of equation for that was take one of our blends, make it a lot stronger, give it some spice up front. And there you go, it's Nicaragua, great, because that's what consumers sort of associate with Nicaragua, because a lot of the most famous producers out of Nicaragua tend to make very full stuff. But
yeah,
what I was surprised with when I lit Camacho Nicaragua up, and the same with Davidoff Nicaragua, is that didn't seem to be the game plan. It didn't seem like it's just going to be, let's make a stronger kind of blend to sort of fit this market paradigm. Like this cigar to me is, of all of the Camachos I've smoked, the most complex. It's not extremely aggressive. And so it, you know, a little bit, maybe it subverts expectations a little bit to use, you know, to use like a film critic kind of lingo, but the same with Davidoff Nicaragua. So can you talk a little bit about that, and also give us a little bit of insight into why is it called Nicaragua if only the filler tobacco has Nicaragua in there? Because that must have been a conversation when you were developing the product.
It was, but we had already started the whole process of so the cigar was going to be called Camacho Nicaragua since the beginning, right? And then the tweaking of the blend, we cared more about making the cigar fit in our portfolio than what actually was in the blend, right? Even though there is a substantial amount of Esteli tobacco, Nicaraguan tobacco in the filler, about 65 to 70%, right? And that's what kind of defines the filler. But yeah, instead of going, you know, with a Nicaraguan wrapper or something, and just kind of, it would not fit right in our portfolio. And like I said, going back to what, you know, we have a spectrum of flavor profiles, right? And this is the gap that we needed, right? That was right in between the Ecuador and the Corojo, right? So that's why. So we, you know, it just the trademarks and everything is just, it had already happened, right? So we were like, all right, we'll just have to explain that. But once people smoke it, they're gonna be like, all right, I don't care if it's called, you know, China or whatever. The cigar is great, you know.
Very good, very good.
Yeah.
I have to feed the fire behind me. So as I'm feeding the fire, is there anyone and any questions for George on Camacho Nicaragua, or comments even? Feel free to come off mute.
See in the comments, a couple of people are like, maybe my new favorite.
Dude, this is my first Camacho Nicaragua, and I don't know why I waited so long. I really like this. Seriously.
It is a tremendous cigar. What in terms of what do you usually smoke in terms of strength, right? Do you like full flavor, medium? Where does this one sit in your opinion? In terms of intensity?
It's just like a medium plus to me.
So like 3.5, 4 out of 5, which is kind of
Exactly.
like our scale, right? Yeah, that's perfect. I would recommend, so obviously for the tasting in terms of time and everything, we're smoking the Robusto, right? But my favorite one would be the Toro, right? It's a traditional
Same here.
Toro. It's outstanding, and also I tend to like Churchill because I like I smoke fairly quickly and I like to just prolong my cigar experience. And Churchill will be the one. Just that this Churchill is a little big, right? So the Toro would be the perfect balance of the blend, size, and time. For me, it's an excellent cigar.
I just wanted to chip in that I really like the approach of bringing in, the notes, bringing in the Nicaragua as a note in the cigar rather than just going
Right.
full blast, right? It's like the same approach as like a Bordeaux wine or something like that, where the benefit of blending really comes to the front and it really makes a difference.
No, of course. I appreciate the comment, and I'm glad you guys like it.
Yes,
So
sounds like people are digging it.
George, if you change this like Toga to a Lancero, do you think it will still be called a Nicaragua?
You kind of broke up in the beginning. If we were to make it in a Lancero,
I think Kevin's saying if it was a Lancero, would you still call it Nicaragua?
probably, sure, no problem. But the thing is that we're not. No, I mean Davidoff as a whole, we used to have Lanceros, right? But it's just not a size that sells, and we want to keep, obviously rotating product, right? So Lanceros is just probably not on the horizon for us. But yeah, I mean, why not? We would probably have to make the label a little bit smaller to go around, but yeah, we could accommodate that. But yeah, actually, it would be very interesting to have, probably next time that I go down to the factory, I'll see if they can venture off. I don't even think they have the molds to make Lanceros anymore, but it would be a very, very interesting size to smoke in a Lancero. Interesting.
Sure. If you need any taste tester, I'm one of the reviewers.
By all means.
Hey, I was the one who said Lancero. That would be me.
All right, so we're gonna move this along. So Marielle, I have a couple of questions for you, but before we get to those questions, can you tell us about 10-year?
Sure. So yeah, the 10-year-old is the benchmark of the range. As you said, it's the one that wins all the awards. So if we had to ask anyone in my team to just choose the one product to showcase exactly what we want to do as a company and what we want to put out in the market, the 10-year-old would be it. We think that the spirit at 10 years of age have reached already the best potential, flavor wise. And then if you put that together with 10 years maturation in first fill and refill bourbons and second fill bourbons, which are super fresh, and then a finish, not a shy finish of 9 months in the freshest first fill oloroso sherry casks, you get a super flavorsome, lovely dram. I think you definitely will notice a difference from the Barrel Reserve and the Rubber Burns to this. There's definitely more maturity on the palate. The 46%. And that non-chill filtration, you can definitely feel it in the palate. Is a beautiful, almost waxy, creamy texture to it. I call it the perfect autumn whiskey. It's almost like walking into a patisserie, and you just get warm croissants, warm biscuits, warm orange cake. It's just very, very warm. All those fresh apples that you got from the Barrel Reserve are slightly cooked here. So you got cooked apples and cooked pears, and the caramel is lingering, a bit zesty. Some people do get a bit of saltiness, like, from the coast, which is lovely. But overall, it's just like a joy to drink, like, from end to finish. So it's, I'm totally biased, of course, because I work for the company, but I also do love drinking my whiskeys, of course. But I think it's slowly, if not, has already become one of those staples of independent whiskeys that you find at a bar that will just never disappoint, right next to, I don't know, like a Bunnahabhain 12 or like Bunnahabhain 16, if you know what I mean. Like one of those that always there, never disappoints, always great product, unfiltered, uncolored, great price, great color. I think it just fits, like, it ticks all the boxes.
Compared to Barrel Reserve and Robert Burns, for me, what I find is the finish is like 10 times longer, right? Like it kind of envelopes your mouth and it just stays. And I find the pairing, I like the pairing a lot more as well. I think because the texture and the body matches the Camacho Nicaragua, I think be a little bit better. Possibly just because of the additional age to kind of round out the flavors. So yeah, I bought a bottle about a month ago and it lasted maybe 2 weeks, unfortunately. So that's that. It was my breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then whiskey. So it went away very quickly, which it's always very sad when I have to toss a bottle. So okay, cool. So while everyone is unpacking 10-year, for the 10-year, I'd encourage all of you, please do drop some notes in the comments about kind of what your experience is, particularly how it's different from Robert Burns and Barrel Reserve. And as we're doing that, the first question that I had for you, Marielle, is what has Ralphie's #1 whiskey meant in terms of, I mean, obviously he's not like a whiskey advocate, right? He's not like a giant magazine or anything. He's kind of sort of like new media or whatnot. But have you seen kind of like a bump in terms of like demand after that video? I mean, I know certainly the YouTube comments would seem to suggest that might be the case, but I always like asking the question.
No, absolutely. I think none of us knew. I think especially here in Scotland, everyone always knew about him. But I think in the company as well, we obviously knew about him, but we just didn't realize the scale. Like, you won't believe, like in the UK, how many times I go and do tastings and shows, and I have at least 10 people at each show just coming by the stand and just saying, Ralphie's whiskey of the year. And I'm like, indeed, yeah, that's the one. So there are so many people that follow him, which is fair. I mean, he has good points. We do believe in the same values that, that he shouts out about, but more actually than the Ralphie review and whiskey of the year. I don't know if you were aware of the online Scotch Whiskey Awards, which were organized by him and Roy from Aquavite, and we won those as well, which for us was like the best accolade ever, because it was just customers that voted, like, freely. We didn't have to pay any fee for any awards. It was just like free online, like votings, and we just couldn't believe that our 10-year-old, like, that our 10-year-old won. We actually won in 2 categories, so we were like absolutely shocked. But also, with all respect, I think it's a bit like maybe arrogantly saying that we worked so hard, especially in the last few years. Just like the cigars that you're smoking, we actually went through a massive rebrand as well 3 years ago, and it was no joke. I laughed at like George's comment about the colors on the cigars. We had exactly the same thing with whiskey. Like we changed our bottles completely, like completely different bottle shape, completely different label, different everything. We added braille to our label. We have a different foil, like recycled paper. We went out there, no idea how many customers were not happy with what we did, despite the fact that we reassured them that we were the same people making the same whiskey. But despite all that, like, now we see the positive of it. Like, now it's 3 years in, so the market, it's seen our bottles for a while. People realize that the whiskey is still the same. We're still the same people making the same quality whiskey. And we're finally, I think, getting that recognition. It's almost like as if our distillery and company matured with the rebrand.
Yes.
Reached our 25th anniversary. And then there's definitely been like a big change. So it's great. Like, we appreciate it, obviously, all the support that we can get, especially from people that just like our whiskeys for what it is, you know, and nothing else. So
yeah, I think the new brand is impeccably done. I mean, I cringe to say this, but in the spirit of this being Zoom and not on Facebook or Instagram or anything else, I think I probably didn't purchase Arran in the past, possibly because of the packaging. If I remember correctly, the old packaging is like a glossy plastic, maybe something like that. When I see this, especially can you tell me about the braille? Like, what's up with the braille on there? Because it's such a cool touch.
Yeah, it's actually my managing director's idea, Ewan Mitchell. There is a very famous wine company that does it, and unfortunately, I can't remember the name right now. But long story short, he's obviously worked in the industry for many years, and he always said to himself, if he ever had the opportunity to rebrand the whiskey from scratch, we used to call the bottle that you just mentioned, we used to call it the Frankenstein bottle, because something was tweaked every couple of years, you know, to make it like quirky and fitting and everything. But then it ended up being like again, because we're on Zoom, we're not on Facebook, on Instagram. I hope this video doesn't go to, like, you know, many people, but it was like a bit of a monstrous sort of like range. Like, every bottle was like not connecting, like, you know, with the other. So when we finally had the chance to rebrand, he said, it's something that I always wanted to do for inclusivity and accessibility to everyone. So I would like to add braille to the label, and we worked with a very good designing company. So now we have, we've added braille, like, you know, to our label, just so that hopefully other whiskey brands will, like, you know, join the movement too, and maybe we'll start looking at other, you know, other aspects, you know, like other ways of making whiskeys more available to as many people as possible, because that's what we want at the end of the day. So
the next frontier in whiskey accessibility is Zoom whiskey. So whenever you're ready to create a whiskey that can be transferred over Zoom, just know, because we'll get 10,000 people on this Zoom. I see your hand is actually raised. Did you have a comment you want to drop here?
Actually, a question. So Marielle, I noticed in the comments that a lot of people are asking, or there's some confusion about the age of the barrel reserve, which doesn't have an age statement, but is there sort of an average age or an idea of how long the barrel reserve is aged?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I think, minimum 7 years. So the only reason why we don't add an age statement to the label is because that as a small distillery, we work in small batches. So even the 10-year-old, you know, gets bottled a few times a year. So it's small batches each time. So because there could be changes in the age, it could be from 6, you know, to 8 and anything in between. We just decided to leave it without an age statement. I do understand that some people don't like it, but at the same time, if you send us a message, an email, if you get in touch with us, or if you ask us like you're doing it now, we're more than happy to just be honest and be completely transparent about it. It is 7 years, minimum 7 years of age.
That's good. Awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, there's another question in the comments as well, which was after you got that, and it's only been, I think, like a few weeks. So I'm not sure. I don't know if the question is 100%, but I think Kevin asked, have you had any difficulties keeping up with demand since that review went out? Like, is there any question around that? Like, I know that whiskey it's on a bit of a different timetable than cigars, where like a cigar maker, and some have done this, I won't name names, but when they get a really great rating, they'll say, okay, we can sell 3 million of these cigars. We don't have them ready, and we don't even have the tobacco ready, but we'll go ahead and just slap something similar together and just get it out the door. So I suppose you can. I don't know if whiskeys ever do that. I hope not.
I hope not.
I really hope not.
I mean, if only we had like thousands of casks and just go like, oh, let's just bottle the 10-year-old. No, unfortunately, we're in no position to be able to do that at all. Since the rebrand, we definitely schedule okay. Whiskey industry is a much slower pace, and everything takes like months. Like, even if we wanted to reschedule like another bottling for the 10-year-old, we need to contact the bottler. We need to see if there's an opening. We need to find the casks. We need to put those casks together. It's not as easy as like, just saying, okay, we just bottle something, like, just sell it like in huge quantities. But you also need to think of the future, because you do want that 10-year-old to become a 12, 15, and 18-year-old in the future as well, 21 and 25. So the answer essentially is no, but it's also yes, because since the rebrand, we definitely had a higher demand. So we did schedule more 10-year-old bottlings each year, because we want the 10-year-old to be available throughout the whole year. It's that one product that we don't want to be missed on the shelves. But at the same time, like I can tell you right now, for example, we're missing like 4 or 5 SKUs from the core range in the UK, which is our home market. Like we don't have any 18-year-old, any 21, any Amarone cask finish, any port cask finish. It's all gone. Like we bottled it, we did our bottle, like, we did that one bottling of the year. And for some reason, after 6 months, it was gone. And now we have 6 months of people asking us when it'll be back. So obviously we will love to bottle it again, but we can't. So we just need to patiently wait and then put it out in the market again.
Beautiful. So you mentioned that the master distiller retired. What does that mean for you guys? I mean, obviously you must have the secret recipe for what you're already doing, but do you see the trajectory of the style changing at all as a result of him retiring?
That's a very good question, because we have a brand new master distiller. His name is Stuart, and he did work at a whiskey distillery. I actually worked at Brora up in the Highlands for a while, and now but before that, he has a very huge background in brewing. So he actually worked for Brewdog for a long time as well, like quite a few years ago. So we had this conversation, because I said, the recipe is great. Everyone loves our whiskeys. But I think because we have 2 distilleries, and now that we have a more established core range, we also have time and scope and space to do something a bit fun, like, something a bit more fun on the side. But I don't think we will ever compromise, like, recipe. I think we find a sweet spot now. Things could change, of course, but I think Stuart has a lot of ideas in mind, especially related to like brewing beer casks, like goose cask, lambic casks, or whatever he's thinking about at the moment. Different, like, milling ratios or different yeasts. I don't know what he's working on, but I think we will definitely keep the Arran core range as it is now, because it's been pretty successful. So I don't think they'll change anytime soon.
Very good. So we had a question on where we're going next. So we're going to quarter cask next. Can you tell us about quarter cask? Like what is it about the production that makes it different? Tell us about its ABV, strength, etc.
Yeah, it is my absolute favorite of the range. So I want you to go ballistic on this. It's amazing. I absolutely love it. It is essentially a double bourbon matured whiskey, in a way that we actually have you tried the opposite afterwards, which is the sherry cask, which is a sherry bomb. Well, now we are in bourbon territory, but like extreme bourbon territory. I don't know if you're a weirdo like me, when you go around distilleries and like you want to smell everything and taste everything. If you have a nose in a bourbon cask, like an empty bourbon cask, it literally smells like banana juice, right? Like tropical, like, sort of like vanilla flavors. So what happens with I get all of that in the quarter cask, because it's matured for 6 years minimum in first fill bourbon cask. So the freshest, the liveliest bourbon casks. And then we do a bit of a faster maturation in quarter casks, which are essentially 125 liters, which are especially made for us by a cooperage up in Speyside. And they're made of first fill bourbon staves as well. So you got double bourbon maturation, but obviously the smaller casks will get a lot more flavor into the whiskey, while we lose alcohol and obviously we lose water, but we get a lot more intensity of flavor here. So it is super lively, super complex. It's like a punch of tropical fruit in your face. I absolutely adore it. It's a bit strong. It's 56.2%. So if you find it a little bit strong, definitely a little bit of water, like it definitely helps here. Or if you have time and you want to let it breathe and like just try it, like, every 5-10 minutes and see how oxygen, works its way around it. It's also a very good idea. But one thing that I'll focus on this is the texture, more actually than those beautiful tropical flavors. It is one of the waxiest whiskey we do. Like once you have a sip, it'll get stuck on your gums, especially at the back of your mouth here, and it will stay with you like forever, and it will change to this sort of like sweeter mango, sweeter pineapple, very black, peppery, spicy, like, you know, super complex, lively, beautiful, like rascal whiskey, which I adore. I love like complexy whiskeys that kind of like change with time. So it's one of my absolute favorites. I hope you like it.
Yeah, and one thing I would say is like as I'm getting close to the end of Nicaragua here. And I think this is like a decent rule when it comes to pairings is that this is such a so much more strength to this whiskey that what you'll find when you're smoking and pairing it is that it sort of eclipses the smoke a little bit, not in a bad way, but I find that when I pair a cigar with a whiskey where the whiskey is a bit stronger than the cigar, the texture of that smoke in the cigar is actually much smoother. It's probably because the sort of aggressiveness on the palate is being the place that is being taken by the whiskey. So I'd be curious to hear everyone in the chat, or you know, if you want to come off microphone and come off mute, to hear kind of what you all think about what the interplay is like, because you know, this is now expression number 4. So, and we're smoking the same cigar, right? So you're getting to see the differences in how a younger whiskey interplays with a very smooth, complex cigar. And now we're getting a much stronger whiskey without the sherry influence to kind of round it out. And it pairs much differently. Nathaniel asks, what's the proof?
Yeah, it's 56.2%. So yeah, it's definitely, sorry. Yeah, 56.2% ABV. So yeah, I realize that's not proof. That's like percentage of ABV. So yeah, it's a bit stronger. I think it's definitely made for single malt lovers and single cask lovers, if you know what I mean. Like if you're not afraid to try a bit of like higher proof whiskey, you'll be rewarded with a lot of like, you know, changing of flavors in your palate and complexity. But I definitely recommend you working your way around it, definitely adding a little bit of water if you find it too hard at first sip.
So
no,
please go ahead.
It's definitely, it made the Nicaragua really sweet, like almost like cotton candy sweet, like.
Yeah, I was just about to, you know, comment something like that. It's bringing, you know, some flavor notes that I'm like, wow, it's and actually, you know, all 3 have been a very pleasant experience, but this last one, it's giving, you know, a new dimension to this cigar. I mean, now I'm gonna have to go and hunt actually bottles of this to stock them here in my home bar. Hopefully my local stores have them here in Tampa. But yeah, I mean, all of the expressions have been excellent so far. So congrats, guys. You know, you're doing a fabulous product. I wish you smoked cigars, Marielle, and would be able to, you know, kind of like, you know, share with us what you really think of your product that, you know, has to do with ours. But hey, you know, especially, I mean, be smoking cigars at 1:02 a.m. over there. That's a tough.
Why not? I would have loved it, but I just found out about the event too late. But I definitely, if I ever come across your cigars in the UK, maybe you can tell me where can I get your cigars in the UK afterwards, so I can go and find some. And,
yes, we have, and I'm not sure if they have Nicaragua. I think so. I think they have these 2, but we'll touch base after.
We'll catch up later.
Yeah,
Michael, we've got a hand raised. Michael, go for it.
Hey, thank you, guys. So normally cigars, they have that are very complex, like the Nicaraguan here, change complexity between the first, second, and third of the cigar. Is that intentional? Because I noticed with the quarter cask, maybe it's the complexity of the cigar that changes the flavor profile and makes it that much sweeter when drinking the quarter cask.
Yeah.
So I mean, in terms of the cigar obviously, you know, it's a journey, right? And that's why usually like the tastings are broken down in thirds, right? It has a lot to do with the combustion of the tobacco and how it progresses throughout. And pretty much the oils get burned out through the experience, right? And they start to change some of the flavors. But for the most part, when you roll a cigar, you have the same amount of tobacco throughout, right? But since these are handmade, you may have a little bit more of that filler towards the middle of that one tobacco that changes a little bit. But it's usually the flavor journey, right? And how it evolves through the combustion of the tobacco and the oils that it has and all that. And that's what kind of, and obviously, you know, pairing it with all these whiskeys has been very pleasant, right? And kind of like it's an enhancement, right? It's a complementary pairing what we're doing right now. But yeah, it's just that journey of the cigar. And also, obviously, we're smoking Robustos right now. It would probably be even better if you get something like a Toro, right? Because your thirds would be longer, right? And I was just double checking the Churchill is a 7x56. That is a monster of a Churchill.
It is a huge
cigar.
cigar.
It's a huge Churchill. Like we have to change that on that site. But yeah, so that one I don't know. You may need a lot of whiskey for that one, right? Because of that ring gauge, you'll get a lot more tobacco in that, you know, because of the ring gauge of the cigar. So that may affect a little bit, but I think this one has been a perfect balance of tobacco combustion and just the exploration of the oils throughout, and then the wrapper, the interaction of the tobacco, the marriage that happens, right?
Malik mentioned a sort of smoky note on the quarter cask. Is his mind playing tricks on him, or is that something that you pick up as well, Marielle?
I will go with the first option. I think maybe I could, well, sometimes when you use super fresh casks, actually the tannins, like, you know, from the casks can, like, you know, make you think of smokiness. It happens in port a lot. I never heard of people getting that in with bourbon, but it is still bourbon, and it's very intense on the oakiness. So it could well be that you are translating that oakiness into smokiness, especially because it was smoking a cigar. So it could well be that you're picking that note. And we all have different palates. It's always, I'm pretty sure every whiskey ambassador says that we all have different palates, different noses. So we all pick different things. No tasting note is wrong here. As long as you enjoy it, everything is fine. Everything goes.
The same thing with cigars. The palate, everybody has different palates, right? So, and it also depends on what you've had throughout the day. You know, what you ate right before you started smoking the cigar. You know, if you got something spicy, sweet, all that stuff has to do with your experience with the cigar.
Absolutely.
Very good. Very good. We got a question. Is the char from the bourbon cask? I mean, I would imagine that's just bourbon casks are by nature charred, right?
Yeah, they all are charred. Yeah, first fill bourbon. So it will just be charred casks that contained bourbon, and then they just went, like, you know, Tetra Pak shipped to Scotland and then put together again without any other like adjustment or like burnt level or anything. So yeah.
Very good. Cool. Okay, so we're gonna talk about sherry cask in Marielle. Thank you. I know that it's like late for you. Your eyes they're not drooping yet, which is incredible. I'm so happy that you're enjoying it. Why don't you tell us a little bit, just briefly tell us about sherry cask. I want to be mindful of your time. I want to hear it. I want to hear it right from the ambassador. So we're moving over to sherry cask. I would encourage you all, if you finish Nicaragua, light up Corojo. We'll talk about that with George in just a second, but can you tell us about?
Yeah, so I think, I actually don't know if you're already trying the sherry cask. I'm going to revolutionize the whole tasting and maybe ask if we tried the 18 before the sherry. Would that be okay?
That's totally fine. Absolutely.
Sorry for changing plans.
Let's do it.
Let's switch around the setup here.
I'll explain you why. Because as I understand, the second cigar that you're smoking, it's a little bit stronger in flavor, but I think it would be unfair to try the sherry before the 18 because I think now that you had the full bourbon experience and we're entering like sherry cask land, essentially, the 18 will be the like the versatile one of the two. It would be like the super elegant, like old, beautiful masterpiece of like the Arran whiskeys, while the sherry cask is gonna finish you off with like a bomb of like sherry cask flavors.
Yes.
I think for your palate especially, let's go 18 first, and then you move on to the sherry, so that you follow like a journey, like, especially
Sold.
18. It makes
Let's
sense.
do it.
So 18-year-old, what's there to say, apart from the fact that it's absolutely delicious, is that, as I said before, these are some of the oldest casks we have in the distillery. Fun fact, because we were in survival mode, we were literally like, backed up by a few shareholders and then private people that were buying casks. That's how we were funded for the first years of our life as Isle of Arran distillers. We filled whatever cask we could find with disregarding like levels of fills, like, what was contained before. So actually the first cask that we filled, we don't even know exactly what type of wood it was. So we know for a fact that these are all like sherry hogsheads of some sort. We don't know if they're first fill, second fill, third fill, or fourth fill. But what we do for the 18-year-old is we get all these sherry casks together, and then we finish them for a little while in first fill Oloroso sherry to revive the sherriness from the old casks, and then bottle it at 46% ABV, unfiltered and uncolored, just like the 10. So we had all the bourbon cask flavors. Now we go into super elegant sherry cask flavors, because Arran, I have this like philosophy, Arran 10, you add it, like, you notice the body, super juicy, super wonderful. It peaks when it's like 14, 15. I don't know if you ever had the chance to try the 14-year-old, but it's super, super juicy and creamy. And then it goes into this decadent, elegant style when it reaches like 18, 21, 25. So I love this because it's like, I always imagine it to be like my wedding, like, whiskey, like, the one that I have in my hip flask when I get married, because it just makes me so happy. It's like a sherry cask that has both dark and like, but also like sweet elements. You can get that oakiness, you can get that like cinnamon and nutmeg, you can get a bit of the smokiness from the oak, but at the same time you get this like baked apricot, so like of figs, so like cherries, and like sweet dark chocolate, which is just absolutely wonderful. Like mouthfeel, it's just so light and creamy. And for such a dark whiskey, you would expect something like very, very intense. Well, in reality, it's like it goes straight to the decadent, elegant, versatile place instead. So yeah, a bit different, definitely different from the 10-year-old. I don't know if you can tell. It almost feels like they're two separate whiskeys that just tell their own stories.
Yes.
Even if they're part from the same distillery, but like very, very different story, very different character.
Beautiful. I just had a touch of the sherry. I'm such a fan of anything sherry finished. So sherry bombs for me, I want to get there as soon as possible. But I completely agree with you. The 18 with Corojo is spectacular. And so I'm excited to follow it up with the sherry. I think that very, very good. Thank you so much for giving your insight there. Okay, so we're a little past the top of the hour. So George, we're going to get to sherry cask in a bit, probably about 20 minutes or so. But
yep.
George, I'd love to ask you a couple of questions. I sent you a list of questions to approve. I wanted to make sure I wasn't getting too deep into the Davidoff vaults of information.
It was good.
Good, very good. So one of the questions that I have is actually around Christian Aroa. What's his family like? Look, and this is coming from a place of total ignorance, right? So Christian was, if I'm remembering correct, or if I researched correctly, was the sort of original owner of the brand. What's his, does he have any involvement, or does the family have involvement in the product to this day? Like, what does that really look like now?
No, so Christian Aroa, well, Julio, his father, had this idea of launching the tobacco here in the US with Corojo, right? And sent Christian to the US to start the line, right? And there was this other person involved, Sal Fontana, which he passed away a number of years ago. And he was the key in teaching him and just kind of like, guiding him through the process of launching the brand here in the US, right? And that happened, right, 98 to 2000, just the works were, everything was in the works to launch the brand here. And then Sal passed away. I can't recall the exact date, 2006 or something like that. Actually, probably was a little bit after that, if I'm not wrong. But after the purchase, right, in 2008, Christian was involved a little bit within the just transition and everything, but it got to the point where you can't have too many chiefs in a tribe, right? So that kind of like stopped very abruptly, probably a year and a half into the whole transition. And since then we did have a somewhat of an agreement of still purchase tobacco from them, because evidently we produce a lot more. We actually consume a lot more than we produce tobacco. And we were buying, obviously, because when we purchased the brand, we purchased the factory and the name, right? But Julio kept the farms. Those are his farms, right? So we did purchase tobacco from them, for a number of years, and then we started producing our own, right? And also purchasing the same quality of tobacco from the same region in Jamastran in Honduras, especially for this one, for the Corojo. So this is a Honduran Puro, right? Wrapper, binder, and filler are Corojo tobacco. So we make sure that actually she doesn't get enough credit, but the purchaser and our master blender is a lady, right? Her name is Patricia Rodriguez, and she is a 28-year veteran with Camacho, right? So she's in charge of creating or putting together all the blends and everything, and purchasing the tobacco, right? So the tobacco that we outsource, we make sure that is the quality and the type of tobacco strain, the primings that we need to keep producing these cigars, right? And so that the flavor profile doesn't change. Right. But yeah, no, after that, no, then Christian started his own thing, basically, which we all know. And at that point, it was just, there was no other interaction. Business, obviously, we see him at the show here and there. Hey, what's up? How are you? And that's it.
Sure. Yeah. And I think like maybe a prior question would be, and maybe, I mean, now that we're smoking Corojo, we can talk about this a bit. Corojo was kind of what put him on the map. And it's, I mean, for all of you who are smoking it right now, it's a delicious cigar. So can you tell us a little bit, just for those who are curious, like what is a bit of the history of the brand prior to Davidoff? What is it that makes Corojo such a core part of the brand? What was it that put it on the map? Why was it unique? Because it really fills a niche. Even to this day, it fills a niche. Yeah. In a crazy industry with unbelievable amounts of new releases every year. It still seems to be kind of the leader in that niche. So what is it about Corojo that's so interesting? What is the history prior to Davidoff? Tell us.
Yeah, so Corojo goes back to Cuba, right? That's where it was created by the Rodriguez family in Cuba, Daniel Rodriguez, and pretty much is what actually put Cuba on the map in terms of tobacco, right? Cigars, world renowned and everything. It was the wrapper that they used on all of their cigars. It was the strain that like I said, put Cuba on the map, worldwide. And then eventually the revolution happened, and at that point, they literally smuggled the seeds. The Rodriguez family smuggled the seeds out of Cuba, and there was, not just them, but there was other growers around that smuggled the seeds out, and they went to what's Mesoamerica, right? So areas of Central America and somewhat Mexico as well, and they started planting Corojo, right? But unfortunately, the strain is very picky where it grows. And they're pretty much landed in an area, in a volcanic area between Honduras and Nicaragua, right? So our side of that area happens to be that's divided by a border, but the land doesn't know that. And it's Jamastran, right? So the climate and terrain it's very similar to Pinal del Rio in Cuba, right, where the original strain used to grow, which are the same seeds that we use now. And you get the highest yield of the plant, right? By that I mean that you get the most production out of one plant, right? You can use all the primings all the way to the 6 prime, which is the Corona. And that's some of those 6 priming we use in the filler in this cigar. And that's kind of like how pretty much Corojo ended up in Honduras and Nicaragua, right? There's actually we haven't tried it, but there's other areas of Honduras that grow tobacco as well. You have Copan, and they've tried to grow Corojo there, but the yield is not the same, right? I don't know if it has to do with the altitude, the terrain, whatever it is, but the Corojo does not grow in other parts of Honduras the same that it grows in Jamastran Valley, right? And in the area of Nicaragua as well. And just, you know, kind of that's how pretty much Camacho, because Camacho was actually, the name of the original owner of Camacho was Simon Camacho, right? He's the Miami guy. He started growing, rolling cigars in Miami, opened up his factory. Well, Cuban, they came from Cuba as well. And he passed away in the year 1995. But in his time in Cuba, this guy would literally actually, you know, send Camachos to Winston Churchill, right? There's says of that. That those are facts that I really can't really fact check, right? But there's, you know, through my research throughout the years and stories that I've heard and all that stuff. So he passed away in 1995, which is right after that is when the Aroa family purchased the brand Camacho from the family, right? And then they married it with this Corojo tobacco that they have been growing, and it also Julio's father had been growing in Honduras since, you know, the 60s. And then that whole thing happened. And that's when Camacho and Corojo kind of came together, and that's when it was launched in the year 2000. But they purchased an existing brand that had been on, you know, going on since 1962, which is kind of in our you know, branding and stuff. Built Bowl since 1962. It's not because of the Aroas, it's because Simon Camacho had been growing Corojo with Corojo strain since Cuba, right?
This is a great example of when my research isn't good enough when I'm putting these together. So thank you for that background.
Yeah.
We had a really good question from Kevin. He said, George, can you talk about the scorpion? Why did it become sort of a mascot for Camacho? And as George is thinking of his answer, I'll tell everyone that I did get a package from Camacho, I think this last summer, where included in it was a freeze-dried scorpion that I ate on Instagram.
It's right here.
And I've got to say, can you take it out of the bag? I still have nightmares about this experience because, like, as a pseudo cigar influencer on Instagram, I get sent packages.
Oh.
And so I got this big box from Camacho, and I was like, hell yeah, man, a bunch of cigars. And then in it was this freeze-dried scorpion, and it said, you've got to eat the scorpion. I think the Instagram challenge, eat the
scorpion challenge.
Eat the scorpion challenge. And so I, you know, in the spirit of participation, I had to go on Instagram Live and actually eat the scorpion. It is on my Instagram page right now. Still, unfortunately, there it is.
So it's sometimes you're lucky and you will get the whole thing, but this one is like, you know, to make it fit in this little container, they have to like break the legs and stuff.
I was one of the unlucky ones that got the whole scorpion, and I have to say that I have to say that honestly, for me, taking it out of the bag was the scariest part. I knew it was freeze dried. I knew it was dead, but I don't like insects or bugs, so I was terrified. And and then I did eat it. For those of you who are asking, no, it doesn't taste like chicken. It tastes like spicy cardboard. That is what it tastes like. Spicy cardboard,
like dry chips. And once you start eating it, it breaks into a million pieces.
It breaks into dust like cinnamon. And so,
oh my God.
So George, here's the funny thing. I saw all of these other influencers doing this Instagram challenge, and you would see the video would cut off right when they started chewing it because it broke into a fine dust. and they couldn't breathe anymore. So like literally all the videos were, and I'm going to toot my own horn. I was smart enough to bring a glass of water with me because I was I have a bad feeling about this. And so I had the glass of water. So I was able to actually eat the whole thing on the Instagram live and not like do the cinnamon challenge, like asphyxiation thing, thankfully.
Yeah. And I know, and I was like, the first video, it was me, obviously, right, starting the challenge. And I did it with my colleague. And literally we were unable to edit out that he started gagging right next to me. He was not on camera, but you can actually hear him like, whoa, because he went bold, right? He put the whole thing in his mouth. I ate little pieces.
Oh, bad idea.
He ate the whole thing. We were, smoking cigars. Our mouths were dry. So this thing was all over, and he's like, whoa. So it's, if you guys want to check it out, actually, all of them are on the Camacho Cigars Instagram. So you go into the reels and you'll see, some of the ones that I uploaded when I got the videos in. And then the first one, you'll see me eating it and, starting the challenge, and you'll see Matthias and everything, the whole 9 yards. But go back to the questions. What's up with the Scorpion? It's they're native to the area, man. They're native to the area. So when we did the rebranding of Camacho, right, we wanted to. So actually, this was a huge investment on Davidoff's behalf. And we worked with actually an agency from New York. And so we wanted to find different, identifiers for the brand, right? So a lot of research went into this. And the Scorpion was like, it was a given, they're pretty much everywhere in Danlí, Honduras, right? Actually, sometimes we find them in our house, right? And they run in pairs. So if you find one, you better look for the other one, right? There's it happens. And funny enough, it happens, I don't know, it's happened twice this past year where they come in the shipment boxes from Honduras, right? So when we get our shipments, they come in, and from time to time, they're like, "Oh shoot, there's a Scorpion there," And obviously,
and then as the brand ambassador, you actually have to eat each one.
No, these are live. They're alive. No. This is all gimmick. This is good to eat. They're alive. Because it's just, I don't know how they make it through the trip, but they do. Right. So we were checking, we had our factory checked and everything. It was just like, what is going on? And it happens to be that probably once the boxes are loaded into the truck, right, that takes them on an 8-year journey from Danlí to the port. That's where they get in. Right. And then they just come to the US. So they're illegal aliens that show up here. And then we just have to throw them in the pond in the back because we just don't know what else to do. We can't kill him. Feel bad. Right. But yeah, that's happened twice this past year, which is pretty funny that your Camacho boxes are like, they have live scorpions inside. Basically,
you guys are taking brand integrity to the next level.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's just a brand mascot just because it fits, man. It's what's around, and it's bold, right? It's like the Scorpion can modify its venom amount to like tackle its own opponent type of thing. So it's very bold. The story, if you kind of do a little research on Scorpions, they're pretty badass, right? And that's just the whole idea of why we make it our brand mascot.
Beautiful. So we're at 8:30 East Coast time, which means it's 1:30. I'm not going to say Europe time because that's totally ignorant of me, but I'll say it anyway. So Marielle, tell us about Sherry Cask. You're totally allowed to hop off after this if you'd like to, because I know that you probably want to go to sleep, but you're not allowed to leave until you tell us about Sherry Cask.
Well, the only thing you need to know is that actually is the best whiskey to pair with Scorpions. It's something that we always say.
Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord.
I'm here just for the Scorpion story. That just made my night. I'm actually looking for those videos just because I'm like, I can't even begin to imagine like even trying an insect or like imagine like a scorpion. So that was that opened up the ideas of like whiskey pairings definitely for me in the future. So yeah, thanks. I'm definitely gonna look into that next time.
There you go.
But yeah, so the Sherry Cask, what to say about the Sherry Cask? That's what it says on the tin. it's a sherry bomb. We never had a product like that in the market. We did some sherry cask finishes in the past, but we never really had a sherry bomb as such. So obviously, matured in sherry cask whiskies and finished in sherry casks. Sorry, matured in sherry casks with a bit of bourbon casks at the beginning for 6-7 years. So again, they're all on average just 7 to 8. And then he's finished in first fill oloroso sherry again. So the only difference with this one is like, imagine the opposite of a quarter cask. That's what you get right now. And it's 55.8% ABV. So again, it's, they're almost like cousins, one on the bourbon side, one on the sherry side. I always say if you needed like a cigar, chocolate, fireplace whiskey, this will be it. Like it just delivers like so much. It's just so dark. It's absolutely wonderful. All the dark chocolates, like, all the overcooked, like, Christmas cakes and very dark oak, like a bit of like cedar oak, but everything is a little bit burnt, if you know what I mean. It's like a super, super dark sherry. It does get sweeter, actually, I think, as he finishes. Like you can get a bit of the sweetness like as he goes down. But overall, it's just like, it packs a punch of like very dark sherry cask flavors. You got all the raisins, all the Santanas, all the Christmas cake. It's definitely a style of whiskey that is getting more and more popular, I think, worldwide. So we just thought about making our own version. And obviously, again, the joy of being independent was being able to make a whiskey that is around 7-8 years of age, cask strength, unfiltered, uncolored. The color is absolutely fantastic on this. And also, like, at a very decent price, being independent allow us to do that. So that's the story behind the sherry cask, the bodega.
Beautiful. And so I guess my question is, and I don't know if there's a good answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How would you, and I'm not even sure how to ask this question because it's clearly coming from a place of ignorance, but like, so for me as a sherry cask finishing, maturation, etc. Lover, there are brands that have built their entire brand on that, right? So like, I'm thinking of like Aberlour, for instance, has built their entire brand on sherry cask finishing. And most of the other major companies, I mean, even like Talisker has sherry finished expressions, etc. Like, are there differences in terms of how companies do sherry cask maturation or aging, or is it sort of like any brand kind of takes some of their best product and says like, we're going to put it in sherry and age it, we know it's going to be good? Like, how does that all work out?
Well, it's a bit of both, because it's just like with peat, with peated expressions. Now not every distillery, I shouldn't say that, but most distilleries do a peated expression because obviously people enjoy their smoky whiskeys. People tend to do a sherry expressions because, customers are enjoying the sherry whiskeys right now. It's I don't want to call it a trend, but it is essentially like, there is a demand for dark sherry cask matured whiskeys. So obviously it would be foolish not to feed into that if you have the right casks for it. Now, as you said, there's a huge difference between distilleries that have built their names on sherry casks, such as Aberlour, Macallan, Glenfarclas, Glendronach, and so on, and distilleries like ours that just have our own core range. As you noticed, is not focused on sherry cask alone, but is focused on balancing flavors with using different, types of sherries. But we thought in 2019, we did get access to very good sherry casks. They're made by a company in Andalusia called Miguel Martin. So they're like 100% oloroso sherry casks. They're super powerful, they're very good, very good cask, very good oak. So we thought, why don't we just start, using them? And why don't we release a product which is sherry cask matured, focused on the sherry casks alone, only because we could. We bottled it thinking it's okay, it's slowly gonna go, in the market, people will slowly discover it. And as soon as we bottled it, we realized that we had to schedule 2 more bottling per year to make up with the demand. So before we had the quarter cask as our third option, and now the sherry cask, we actually have an issue with the sherry cask outshining the quarter cask because all of a sudden everyone just wants the sherry cask, which is we have expected that obviously, but it's definitely like one of the most loved out of the core range. So it was definitely a good call on our side to release something like that, which is actually a bit extreme for us. Like if you notice our range, we don't tend to go to extremes, like super extremes as such. But since the rebrand, we are experimenting a little bit more with extremes, like instead of just balancing flavors out. But customers are not complaining, so we're happy. So everyone is happy.
And I guess this is like another question that I've always had, that you are the lucky person that's here for me to ask this question, and that is like, why sherry cask? Like, why is sherry cask so unbelievably popular versus Cabernet cask finishes, which is becoming more popular with some of the American whiskeys. There's all of these sort of like much smaller niches in terms of like cask maturation, but sherry just seems to be the undoubtable kind of obvious choice. Why is that?
So initially, if we go back in time, initially sherry was used only because sherry casks were shipped whole to the UK, especially, so to Scotland. And then once they were emptied, Scottish people would use anything to mature whiskey, so they started using them too. So I don't think it really happened in the old days, like willingly. It just happened by mistake. But then as more and more distilleries based themselves in using only sherry cask, they definitely took over like this idea that sherry cask was more refined. There's also, like, if you allow me to say, like, again, it's a little bit mean to say, but there's also like a lot of ignorance about sherry casks as
Oh no, did we lose her?
Oh wow. Right when
Oh no. Okay, well,
there she is. There she is.
that wasn't me taking a nap. I promise. That was just the last one. So here, I just froze. No, yeah. So it was that exactly. It was definitely the fact that like big distilleries and big companies made this sherry cask so famous and refined, like traditional and classic and like luxury. So a lot of people jumped on that wagon too. But let's not forget that finishing has been happening like since the beginning of time. We also built our name on finishing, and we finished in possibly every single wine that is possibly ever produced in Europe and like overseas. So why do people use sherry casks? Because they're very different from bourbon casks that are very cheap to use. And sherry cask has a status, like is known to be, like, by the consumers, is known to be more refined, more expensive, so therefore giving like better quality to the whiskey. And second, because these distilleries, Macallan, Tamdhu, Glendronach, Nabarlauer, had worked with bodegas for so long. Now we have bodegas that produce what we call seasonal sherry casks, which don't go through the Solera system. So they're almost like fast matured sherry casks. They can be, essentially fast matured sherry casks that you can use easily and they are much cheaper. So now everyone is feeding off that market, if you know what I mean, because it's very hard to get Solera casks that have been used for hundreds of years. But it's very easy to get seasonal casks that are just, being made 6 months ago, and they can easily ship to the UK, to Scotland to be used.
So you said something really interesting, which is the opposite of what I've heard, which, like, my understanding is that sherry casks are the most expensive to use, which is why. Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Compared to bourbon, absolutely, yeah. But they're not as expensive. Like a Solera cask is definitely not expensive as a seasonal, like seasoned cask. That's what I meant to say. Sorry. You can get like cheaper, like, that's what I meant to say. You can get cheaper sherry casks these days because the market, because Jerez has evolved, and people have found other ways to produce sherry casks in a faster way.
Yeah. Beautiful. Excellent. Yeah. So I have a couple of questions more for George. So Marielle, I know it's late. I'm not going to boot you from Zoom. I'm a decent host, but I will give you the opening should you want to go to sleep. You don't have to.
She may want to hang out for a little longer.
You're allowed to hang out. You're allowed to hang out. Should you like to? We're going to end officially at 9 o'clock our time, which is 2 o'clock your time.
That's fine. I still have some whiskey to drink, so 20 minutes I can do
Perfect. Perfect. Excellent. Very good. So with that, George, so I have a couple of things. So the first is I'm gonna communicate a trick that I heard at a Michael Herklot's tasting at Nat Sherman. George, I actually want you to chime in here. You're allowed to say it's bullshit. 100% allowed to say it's bullshit. I won't tell Michael that you said that, but one of the interesting things that he said to do, and I kind of put this out here for everyone to kind of try on the Zoom call, when he's tasting different blends, he's trying to understand not just the flavors. So for me, I get a lot of the flavor from the aroma of the smoke, which is why I don't smoke when it's windy out, for instance, because I don't want the smokes blowing away where I can't actually get any of the aroma. But one of the things that you also look for is which parts of the palate are being activated by the smoke of the cigar that you're smoking. And one of the kind of exercises that Michael suggested that I actually thought was kind of cool is, and I'll demonstrate this. I'll explain it first. Is basically taking a puff, keeping
holding the smoke
in your mouth, and make sure where I'm going. And George, you can cut me off if I'm explaining this wrong, because it's been like 8 years since he explained this. But taking a puff, keeping the smoke in your mouth, tensing your tongue. So think of your tongue as a muscle, which it is, and tense it so that it's rigid. You can close your eyes and just sense over the period of about 10 seconds which parts of the tongue are being activated the most. And what I want you can drop it in the chat like Kevin just did. Don't look at Kevin's chat. We don't want to bias you or anything, but give that a try, and then hold it for 5 or 10 seconds, and then just come off of mute or drop it in the chat. What parts of your tongue are activated the most? So I'm going to give that a try now.
I will add something to this.
Yeah, more.
Because this may be a little unfair for this cigar in particular, because this is all Corojo, right? And some of the traits of this strain are, and it's a very, you can call it Cubanesque flavor experience, smoking experience, right? So it's very linear. So it hits the front and the back of your palate. And I do that when I do some of my other tastings, that I add different components like flavors and sauces and stuff like that. So this one should hit the front and the back of the palate. The strain itself, since it's all Corojo tobacco, should not, kind of hit the sides of your palate, right? So maybe we could have tried that with the Nicaragua that has a blend of tobacco, right? Yes. And then the different strains in that cigar, the complexity of it, and that's why it's complex, right? This one's very linear, so it's a very Cuban flavor profile, front and back. So the sides of your palate should not be really activated. But I'm curious to see if people are getting something on the sides.
So Kevin, I'm just going to stop the entire Zoom and say that you're wrong. You're
I don't want to at it.
Your experience is invalidated. No, of course I jest. I find for myself, so I do this with a lot of the cigars that I smoke, because I reviewed cigars for 7 years. And it was kind of just part of my process. I find for this cigar personally, for me, and again, only for me, that I get like a distinct sizzling sensation, like right on the front of my tongue. Mm-hmm. Not as much on the back. That could be because I bombed my palate with delicious whiskey all night. So that could be part of it for sure. We've got Malik saying right smack in the middle. Oh, with the Nika. Okay, interesting. So you're still smoking Nicaragua.
Well, Matthias, for me, I didn't tense up my tongue. I just kind of let it kind of all like loose and just let it flow. And I feel like there's a sensation kind of go like from like the middle of the side middle kind of goes towards the front.
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay, and it's funny that you mentioned Michael's tasting, because he's a wealth of information, as you already know, right? And we discussed this actually holding it in the mouth because we were doing a pairing with barbecue sauce and jerky and all that stuff, and there was some spicy components and stuff, and he was mentioning to hold the smoke in your mouth, and it's kind of like it like serves as a cooling factor, right? So it would kind of like numb your palate, and all the spiciness would go away for a little bit. And then we actually, the whole company tried it, since evidently that he's with us, and we're distributing his product and all that stuff, blah blah blah. So we get on calls with him and all that stuff. So and that he did mention that, and then so we tried it a couple of times, but maybe because when we were doing this, we were adding spicy barbecue sauce, and the spiciness from the jerky, the beef jerky at that moment. But yeah, he did. That's kind of like how, going back to the whole linear thing, he did mention that this one cigar in particular was very linear, right? Which is something that I had known before, right? But given that we have tried these delicious whiskeys that activate your whole palate, that's why maybe we're getting some of those areas. If we were just smoking a cigar by itself, it would be a different story. But when you start adding flavor components, which obviously the whiskey has flavor in it, so it activates your palate, right? So you may be sensing some of the strains that usually the cigar would not be able to explore in, but since it's the whiskey opened them up, the smoke goes in there, and then you get those sides, right, in the back of the palate and the top and all that stuff. So it's very interesting. Again, I've seen Michael teach someone how to smoke cigars by drinking water. I don't know if you ever experienced that, just with a straw and water and the whole thing. We were all like, wow, literally. And this lady left smoking cigars, first timer. And then, nothing, she didn't choke or anything. So it was good. The other thing that I would probably, some of you guys look like seasoned smokers, is the retrohale, right? How do you, Matthias, feel about the retrohale? I tend to do it every, maybe 10 puffs. I retrohale one, just to, I don't.
So George, yeah. So I'm not going to talk about what I experienced from it just yet. I think it would be great for you to maybe talk about that, like just as a technique, because it really is a technique. It's a technique that can go wrong, especially if you're smoking something really strong without anything to pair with it, et cetera. So can you talk about that?
Or if you do it too often, right? That's why I said, I do it every 10 puffs. I retrohale one. So pretty much, and master blenders, right? Throughout our company and different companies around, right? That's pretty much, they see it as the blend comes to a full circle, right? So you get the 360, because you do have receptors through your nostrils that when you have it in your mouth and puff it out, you don't get, so you get part of the experience, right? So for example, I was with Eladio Diaz, years ago, and we were, testing some stuff. He was the master blender for Davidoff for, decades. So we were testing some blends, and he would retrohale, right? But then again, this is a master at his craft that would even inhale cigars, so that's a different story. But the retrohale was very important, and the whole, and that's where I get these numbers from, right? The whole 360 reference and the full circle type of thing, translated into English. But that's how pretty much, in moderation, because if not, you'll just toast your nostrils, right? If you're smoking something very strong, if you're smoking a Connecticut, by all means, do it a few times and all that stuff. You'll actually feel it, right? But this is a powerful cigar. So every, 10 puffs or so, give it a nice retrohale and see what kind of, how that affects, your palate, and then just the overall sensation of the cigar. So through the retrohale, and this one in particular, you'll get a little bit of woodiness, right? That you can actually narrow down to cedar, right? Some leathery notes as well, lots of spiciness. Yeah, so you may get a little bit of a runny nose and glossy eyes, but that's why, in moderation a little bit, it would just kind of bring the blend together, right? It actually works very well when you have more complex blends, and that I mean by having different wrappers and binders and fillers and having that recipe put together. This one, it's all the same: wrapper, binder, and filler. It's Yr and Quarter, like I mentioned, but it works very well in some other ones. So every cigar that I try for the first time, or it's in my daily rotation of the 10 cigars that I smoke a day, like I said, that's my kind of rule of thumb. Every 10 puffs, I retrohale once, see how that brings everything together, and then I go on.
And just for those, Michael, I see your hand. I'm going to get to you in just a second, but just for those who might not be familiar, what is retrohaling and how do you do it?
That's a tough one because we've tried it before and people think that it's inhaling. No, so it's like literally shutting the back of your palate and pushing the smoke through your nose, right? I mean, if you can elaborate a little bit on that, but that's basically what it is. You shut the back of your palate and instead of like blowing it through your mouth, you kind of like try to blow it through your nose, right?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, I and this is just the way that I do it. I retrohale by closing the back of my throat and actually closing my mouth. And the action of closing my mouth as my mouth is closed naturally pushes the smoke out through my nose.
Yeah, and actually works also well when you like inflate your cheeks type of thing, and then help that extra air inside help with push through the
yes, yep.
You know, so it looks kind of funny with like that, but it's just it works, right?
Yeah, beautiful. So I've got one more question for you, and this is a question I've had. This is a marketing question for those of you who don't know. This is not my full-time job. This is just a hobby that I like to do with Dave and Kelvin and all the other guys. On the Davidoff website, there is and I'm not going to share my screen. Maybe I will in a few minutes. But on the Davidoff website, on each blend that you can visit on the website, it says how long the cigar can be enjoyed for. And
I don't go by those numbers.
And those numbers, so like the Nicaragua Robusto, for instance, it says 45 minutes of enjoyment time. And for me, I would have to rush my ass off to be able to smoke that in 45 minutes. And it's like the same with the longer formats. It'll be like Salomones, like 65 minutes. And it's like, what? It's like a 2-hour smoke. You know what I mean? So
I mean,
where's that coming from?
Yeah, that's kind of like a guideline, right? I definitely don't go by those numbers, you know. So when I smoke, I'm a quick smoker, you know. I puff a lot and I take big puffs out of the cigar and then it smokes very quickly. So yeah, I mean, when I've done some of my my tastings and stuff, so we have this program that we had last year. We still have it now, but it's called Camacho Cure Sauce and Smoke, where we paired barbecue sauce with jerky, and then the Camacho Connecticut, Ecuador, and Corojo. And when we were in the beginning stages of this, I would smoke all 3 cigars, Robustos, in about an hour and a half, you know, even less. An hour and 15 was my record time. But when I finished that, I was done for the day. That was way too much. Right, it was way too fast because we were like, okay, we'll have these people, so that's why we focus now on just like the first third of the cigar. That's it, right? So yeah, some of these numbers are like a reference, right, just to kind of add to the experience. Some people can like, it also has to do with all right, that's why there's different sizes, right? Not only because the flavor is affected,
absolutely,
like,
absolutely.
All right, a shorter one won't last me an hour and a half, right? It's kind of like a given, right? But still, you gotta kind of like hold them by the hand and carry them to the register, and that's like, you know, it helps people make their choices and what size they'll get, right? And then if you have a great salesperson there, will explain somewhat of a, you know, like the Robustos pack a little bit more of a punch than your Churchills, right? But the Churchill will give you a prolonged flavor experience, like I was explaining earlier. The burn of the oils and all that stuff will be a prolonged experience. The Robusto as well. I mean, you only get this much cigar, right? So make the best out of it. So yeah, that's kind of, I mean, I see those numbers sometimes. I'm like, oh Lord. And the thing is that they ask me sometimes to put these numbers, like, how do you think? I'm like, 15 minutes. But yeah, it's and we kind of like everything is aligned with Davidoff as well. So that a lot of that comes from Switzerland. So right. You know, if you have a, you know, like Davidoff Toro, right? I mean, why would a Camacho Toro smoke quicker or longer than a Davidoff Toro? So it's just right. You know, kind of like a guide. Yeah. Okay, I got one more burning question for myself, and that is that I know that with Avo, are you the brand ambassador for Avo as well? Yeah, you are. Okay, cool. So we'll be doing an Avo event soon then. I'll just put that out there. We're going to do it. We're going to make it happen. But one of the things that's interesting about Avo to me is that from my conversations with some other people at Davidoff, maybe you, Carrie Bay is fantastic.
I would love to do a tasting of that cigar.
Which one? The Caribe?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, and actually that might be a good example. Like, so I think that two of my favorite Avo cigars ever were released in 2021. One was Caribe, Unbelievable cigar. That's a regular production, right?
Yes.
So it's an unbelievable regular production cigar. It has no right to be regular production. It's just, it's obscenely good. And then there's the limited edition 2021, right?
That is my regular and everyday.
Which is unbelievable. But both of those, and you'll have to talk all of us through this because again, I don't work at Davidoff, so I don't know. But Avo uses that like very particular Davidoff tobacco, right? In their blends, or at least in some of their blends.
Yeah.
Okay, so two-part question. So that's the answer to the first question. Does Camacho ever utilize Davidoff tobaccos? And I ask that because the complexity that I get from even Camacho Connecticut, right? Which is like, that is not an expensive cigar.
No.
Phenomenal. That is like, that's the cigar that I will always be happy to smoke. I'll always be happy to, when I introduce people to cigars, that's basically the cigar that I recommend is Camacho Connecticut. Are there any Camacho products that borrow from the Davidoff portfolio?
Yeah, and in fact, when I got your email with the questions, I right away called the factory, talked to the GM, Manuel Batista, and I'm like, all right, I'm just double checking, right? If we have enough of this tobacco that we're producing, all that stuff, blah, 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 and all that. So yeah, there's different, like the Camacho Criollo, for example, uses Piloto Cubano, which is grown in Dominican Republic. That is part of tobacco that it's a Davidoff tobacco, right? Piloto Cubano. You have San Vicente in the Nicaragua, actually. You know, part of that Dominican description that you see there, Nicaragua, Honduras, and Dominican, that is San Vicente tobacco, which is used in some of the Davidoff cigars. You have in the Camacho Ecuador, you have Pelo de Oro, which is used in some of the Davidoff cigars, and that's tobacco that we bring from Dominican Republic to our factory in Honduras. So yeah, I mean, we do that as well. It's not like, you know, we want best practices work throughout the company. Right. And if some of the tobacco fits in that blend, and remember the not only Patty in Honduras, but this goes through the panel in Switzerland and all that stuff. So if the blend makes sense, then we'll use tobacco from wherever our arsenal is stored. Right. So yeah, so that we do use some Davidoff tobacco in some of our Camacho cigars that are, you know, moderately priced.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel very happy to hear that, only because that's kind of, and a lot of this is just big brand related stuff. The fact that Camacho is owned by Davidoff, but you know, I smoke a lot of new releases every year. So does Kevin, so does Dave, so does Christian. But that level of complexity is very difficult. I find with a lot of new releases, they might taste nice. They might taste really nice, but that level of complexity and depth to the aroma specifically, I find is lacking with so many new releases. And I get that with a Camacho Connecticut
absolutely. I mean, and that is even though we're known for making, you know, all the cigars and all that stuff, that's our whole branding, but our Camacho Connecticut is our best selling cigar, right? By far. That is what that's just the, you know, if everybody smokes a good Connecticut, right? And that one, I like to, you know, and this is not on Facebook Live or anything, but I like to call it a Connecticut with balls, right? Because it does have a nice complexity. So you have a nice creamy wrapper on the outside, but what's under the chassis, what's in, you know, under the chassis, under the hood, it's bold. You know, it's got a lot of flavor. And that one actually was introduced in 2009, and that was a blend that I'll give some credit to Christian on that. That he worked. That was the first joint venture between Davidoff and Camacho. So it was Hanky and Christian put that blend together, and it's our best-selling cigar.
Yeah, that is zero surprise to me. I don't know if everyone else on the Zoom, if you've had a chance to smoke Camacho Connecticut, but it's unbelievable. I mean, I don't necessarily want to talk prices here necessarily, but you
Yeah.
can find them on the internet for $6-7 a cigar, and they will outperform $14 or $15 cigars easily.
Hmm.
So,
And
just,
it's interesting because like you were talking about the Avo limited edition 2021, that was a limited release. I was able to, I'm not going to disclose the number of, I secured a number of boxes for myself because I smoke one of those cigars every single day. It's a nice double Corona, which is my perfect size, right? And to have it in your rotation, if it gets into the hands of somebody and they're like, all right, if I smoke 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cigars a day, and that's one of them, that is the importance of having a great, complex, consistent blend, right? Because some of these other new releases, yeah, they taste good, and you're like, oh yeah, this is great because you're having it with whatever you're pairing it with. But then after a while, it's like, all right, no, I'm not gonna buy it again. I'm just gonna go back to my regular ones, right? Which regular ones, that's not part of that rotation that I'm talking about. And we do have a lot of people that Camacho, Connecticut, it's part of the rotation, just like the Nicaragua became part of the rotation, right?
Yeah. I'm literally trying to find any in stock right now on the different
Of the Connecticut?
No, the 2021.
Oh,
looks like it might all be gone. I mean, I've hit 4 different websites and they're all
no, they've been gone for a while.
Okay.
They've been gone for a while.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
that's a bummer. Well, if you can find it on the secondary market for everyone on the Zoom, definitely recommend giving it a try if you haven't had it. Kevin, there's a hand up. Go for it, man.
Hey, so George, just out of curiosity, I did the blind review for the Liberty 2021. It's such an amazing cigar. Two part is it true that is gonna be like the last release for the 20?
That was the last one after 19 years. Yep.
And why is the follow-up question?
It had it ran its course, right? 19 years. It's a but people are like, oh my God, why didn't you make it to 20? It just didn't, it didn't fit our just, forecast and everything, right? But this 2021 that we produced is probably one of my favorite ones. It was
it's incredible.
Again,
the
the size is perfect. We had never done a Churchill in that one before, right? I was not able to secure many boxes of those. I do have an empty box up there, but I do have some in the warehouse and in the office. But that is an excellent cigar. We wanted to go out with a bang. Churchill size, a blend that was very complex as well. A beautiful white and it's actually very dark blue, but if you take a picture of it, it looks black, right? The contrast of the label, we had never used a white label like that. It's with the Camacho name on it. It's something that we really took pride in it. Wanted to do with this very Americana look to it. But yeah, it was the last one. It doesn't say that we're not going to do any limited releases, anymore. Also the thing with that was kind of like a problem. So we have our brand portfolio, right, lives in sections and price points, and the Liberty being at $20, it's a little much for your regular Camacho smoker that expects to pay, whatever the price is, $8 to $10, depending on which one you smoke. So that one, I mean, we sold out completely of all the Liberties, fine. But yeah, that was kind of like it's just like it sits in different, coming from a brand, because a lot of people don't know that, Camacho is owned by Davidoff, even though it's been 14 years. But they're like, why is this so expensive? Blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of like what alleviated some of that, right? And after, 19 years of being anywhere, I think it's always been at $20, even with inflation and everything. It was time for it to, put it to rest. But I think we went out with a perfect blend. I agree. Everybody was just very satisfied with that blend. We had a lot of, great reviews on it and everything. So it's just, it was time for it to, to put it to rest.
Yeah.
Oh, I completely agree. And where should I send my address to?
Yeah, I mean, man, I wish I had kept some more. It's just, I don't even, I would have to double check if we have any tobacco left at the factory. I would definitely make some more of those. I don't care if we has a band on it or not, but just that cigar is just amazing. It's probably aside from the Nicaragua that came out the year previously. It's probably I don't know. The factory release is such a great smoke too. That's a tough one. I don't know what, but definitely the Liberty 2021 was an excellent cigar, and I think we put the line to rest with a we went out with a bang, right? And I hopefully some of you guys got to try it and enjoy it.
Yeah. Beautiful. So we're at the top of the hour, so it's 9 o'clock. So we're gonna go ahead and signal the official end of Perfect Pairings Volume 9. I'm going to hang out. I'm sure George is going to hang out. We don't necessarily do clapping here, but Marielle, thank you so much for coming on and giving us so much of your time so late at night. It really is. It's absolutely incredible. I did. If you have like one more minute, the last question I had for you is in your Instagram bio, there was another distillery listed. And I was just, can you tell us about that? Is there any available on the market? What's the deal with it?
Yeah, it's super exciting. I always say I joined the company at the right time in 2019 because we had a rebrand and I saw a distillery being built and finished. And I saw the first spirit running through the stills. And in May of this year, we'll have a very first whiskey. So it's amazing. I don't know where these years have gone, but it's a brand new project. It's heavily peated, West Coast whiskey. So completely different from what you tried today. We're going straight on with the peatiest, whiskey that we can produce on the island, fully matured on the island. So we're just completely changing, it's a complete different whiskey, complete different brand. And because we got a second distillery to play with, we are expecting a lot more experiments in the future as well with peated and unpeated whiskeys. For example, we did some blended at birth casks in which we got some fresh, bourbon cask, and we filled the 50-50 with lag new make and Locranza new make, so heavily peated and non-heavily peated spirit. We filled on the same day 20 casks of Calvados from Normandy with lag and Locranza, so that in the future we can bottle them side by side. But it is essentially our playground. We have orchards. We're thinking of doing maybe cider or brandy or smoky cider or smoky apple juice. I don't know what craziness will come out of that, but it is a brand new project. So May this year is when the very first single malt whiskey will come out. So finally 3 years and a day have passed. So super excited.
You said this year, 2022, the first whiskey will come out.
Yeah, in a few months.
Oh man, that is so exciting. Malik asked before you go, where are you from originally? I guess I should have asked that, so my apologies. Where are you?
I mean, it's a given. I'm Italian, of course. It's pretty obvious, but I come from a tiny little town in the middle of nowhere in the Napoli area, so near Sorrento, Amalfi Coast, so southern Italy, essentially.
Wonderful. Yeah, I spent my honeymoon there. It's a beautiful place.
It's a beautiful honeymoon place. Yeah, I went from limoncello to whiskey. So, and then unfortunately I fell in love with the Scotsman. So now I'm stuck here. So same.
Yeah, you're stuck now. Beautiful.
Yeah, Marielle, you were asking if we sell Camachos in the UK and all that stuff. Through Instagram, I'm gonna connect you with Roy Summer. He's our counterpart in the UK. And he pretty much carries all of our products from Davidoff to Camacho, Avo, and all that stuff. And then maybe you guys can do something local, on that side of the pond.
That'd be great.
That way, you guys can chat and do something and then share some ideas and stuff, because he does some of this stuff locally. as well. So yeah, we'll do that. But thank you for joining us. I know I feel bad, it's super late over there, but I mean,
No, it's
yeah.
actually,
I don't know if you have to go
Thank
into the
you,
office
everyone.
tomorrow, but whoa.
Actually, unfortunately, I am, but it's okay. It's fine. I'll be sober by then. I didn't have that many whiskey. It's fine. But I actually have to thank all of you. Thank you, George, for your knowledge. I don't do a lot of cigar and whiskey tasting, so it's been absolutely wonderful listening to you and learning so much about cigars and scorps and everything else. So it's been great. Thank you, Matthias, for the opportunity. Obviously, thank you all to Link and the whole team for having me. I think I will log off now and stop talking and just leave you guys to it to enjoy the rest of the night. But thank you very much. Slange. Cheers. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you so much, Marielle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tony, you're on right now. So why don't you tell, we got a couple of questions about, obviously these bottles are not widely available at all. I can attest to this because I've searched for them myself. Can you tell us what you have in stock, where you're based, do you ship out of the state, etc.? I have no idea where you are, but you have to unmute yourself.
He's there, but he's got to unmute himself. Well, let me see. Ask to unmute.
Okay.
There you go.
Yes, they are very difficult to come by. And the other thing is, with the COVID situation and the shipping and production issues and all that, I'm going to lean on our distributors. And I would say, as Matthias typed in, if you can reach me on my cell phone or get on our website, I have availability through the distributors to get that, because we put this on and they're very interested in, people like you guys who were on today. And I will try my very best to satisfy you. And I think that can be done.
Very good. Thanks, Tony.
Okay.
Also, I mean, just kind of like a question. What's the price point on these? I know we've had, all different ones. But Tony, out of your knowledge, what's the price point on
I have them listed all on the website, and I don't
Okay.
know what the prices actually are.
Okay.
But they aren't at least the entry level are not that expensive.
Okay.
And yeah, as I said, George, please give me a holler and I'll have all that info for you. I see how much interest there was, and as I said, we have the distributor has a couple. The distributors have a couple of secret stashes, and they said, because I asked that question, if there was some interest in them, can we get some? And they said, we'll make that happen. So, give me a holler. I'll go through the prices of the upper echelon that we tasted and try to make you guys happy. Okay.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Tony.
Hey, Tony, this is Mike Hawkins.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing great. So I'm in the process of starting a luxury premium cigar lounge in Irvine. Thank you. It's quite an endeavor. But I wanted to know what is your?
There's a pandemic going on and all that.
Oh well, we're looking to overcome that.
I admire your daring.
Absolutely.
And your question?
So wanted to know what is your contact information? I wanted to know. I'm putting a list together of liquor distributors for consideration. So just wanted to know, is that a possibility for us to reach out to you and see if we could curate maybe some of your distributors?
I have been working almost nonstop for about 3 years since this crazy pandemic started. I would be happy to, meet you here, there, or anywhere, and we'll go through it and talk about it and help you in any way I can.
Yeah, I'll Mike, I'll put Tony's email address in the chat as well, so you can shoot him an email.
Okay, great. Thanks, Matthias.
Maybe the
Mike, I admire, as I said, I admire your daring.
Where are you at?
I'm in White Plains, but of course,
Okay.
with this, we're delivering all over the place and the shipping thing.
Yeah.
So where are you, George?
I'm in Tampa. I'm originally
really?
from Miami, but I moved to Tampa 3 years ago to be closer.
I really enjoyed, sitting in on a couple of these. It's amazing the synergy between wine and it's the way it's made and all the things that happen and cigars and
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's amazing. Even the verbiage sometimes,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they go hand in hand, you know what I mean? Because it's like Mike, you're opening your place soon, right? And then you want, if you have somebody smoking a cigar, right, that means in terms of business, it means that they'll probably have 2 or 3 drinks, right? Depending, again, if they're smoking a Robusto, they drink quick, they'll be out in 20 minutes. But if they're smoking a double Corona, that's 3 drinks. So they go, in terms of business, yeah, but also in the creation of the product, right? Wine and bourbons and whiskeys and all that stuff. It takes it's time is of essence there, right? And obviously the price comes a little higher when you drink stuff or that it's wine or whiskey and stuff that it's been aged longer, right? So that is something that is very relates to cigars very well, right?
And the same thing that drives George, the same thing that drives your guys to make the great cigars is the same thing that drives the distillers to make a great scotch and the wine people to make a good glass of wine.
I think it's a lifestyle that we all share. And Tony, do you smoke cigars?
A little bit, not as much as I did before this craziness. I've been working, like I said, really crazy hours, and I don't even have
so you did the opposite. Now people are smoking more because of the pandemic. You stopped a little bit.
Yeah, I did actually.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, Matthias is gonna share your info. Maybe we can talk and we'll.
George, I'd love that. I'd love that.
Mike, where are you based out of again?
So I'm currently in Bowie, Maryland. So technically Upper Marlboro. But if you know anything about the area, Six Flags America is the main landmark Oak Creek community. So we have a world-class golf course. I live across from the 18th hole. But a lot of great people here, and I think one of the biggest things is that we are lacking a very luxury cigar lounge. I'm not sure if you guys have frequented the area. In Chevy Chase, once there was a lounge called Civil Lounge. So we're really looking to bring that to the community and just bring a very luxurious pairing situation to the Maryland community. One of the things I wanted to mention, I was going to chime in. Part of the cigar lounge is for things like this, Matthias. We're going to actually include a classroom with virtual capability, with TVs and desks, so that we can host these things on a more broad scale. So I come under the coaching tree of Stanley Cooper. So if you know anything about Stanley, he is a great teacher, and we want to bring that to the masses. So that's what I'll share. If anyone wants to reach me, I'll share my information as well. Thank you.
Yeah, drop it in the chat, man.
Awesome.
Very good. Well, guys, if you have any questions you want to ask George, please do. I mean, I have a question about Triple Maduro, because that was, as George and I were organizing this event, Triple Maduro was
one of the contestants.
Was one of the contestants, and I think that it followed Nicaragua with all of the alcohol, et cetera, as well, in terms of being able to break through with respect to strength and everything else. Is that cigar all Maduro? Literally all of the leaves in the cigar, all Maduro? Yeah. The second question there would be, why the hell hasn't anyone else done that? Because it seems like an obvious, for anyone who likes Maduro, I like Maduro, like that's, from a marketing and branding standpoint, it's like obvious, right? Do a Triple Maduro or do an all Maduro cigar, but I have to imagine that it's not that easy to do. because I don't see it very often.
Yeah, I mean, it has something to do with also, it's very handy to trademark the name Triple Maduro, right? So evidently that I believe there's a couple more that have tried out there, but it goes back to to the whole process of time, right? That I was just discussing just a minute ago. The fermentation process takes time, right, for it to mature and become a Maduro tobacco, right? And then not everybody has the time, right? And it's something that it's got a niche, right? It's not a cigar that everybody's gonna smoke and it's gonna fly off the shelves and stuff like that. Even though it's a beautiful, nice dark oily San Andres Mexican wrapper that we have, and it's just a tobacco, and also people may be like, whoa, Triple Maduro, the whole myth of it. It's like, oh my God, it's gonna be super strong.
Right.
Which is the complete opposite, right? Because when you ferment tobacco, it loses its strength and diminish the amount of nicotine, and then the outcome of it is just like it kind of tames the beast, right? So when you have a Triple Maduro, and that's one of the things that you were actually talking about, that it's like this cigar may not be as strong to kind of like compete with some of these whiskeys, right? And that's kind of like why other people have not tried it, I don't know. That we've had other competitors replicate our colors, out there, the whole color scheme and all that stuff. I could name a few brands already by now. Before it used to be one or two, and now it's just a list. But I don't know. It's something that we're missing, and we reduced the SKU count on those because we did have the 1118, which that is a date actually. 1118. It's somebody's birthday, and the previous owners that we just wanted to kind of like take that out of our SKU system. And eventually there will be a new size to that, which is very similar to that one. Just going to be, instead of being that fat belly looking thing, it's going to be a Toro, right? So don't share this with anybody out there. So we're going to bring it out in a Toro, and that one will give it a little bit of life to that line. That is just, it's an excellent cigar, but we just don't, it's not part of our. And then eventually we'll bring it into the core, right, to try to push it a little bit more. But as to your question as to why other people have not tried it before, I'm not sure, because it just takes time, and time means money. And it's just the process. I'm not really certain as to why.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. David, I see a hand raised.
Yes, thank you. George, I want to put a shout out to the Nicaraguan and the American Barrel Age, because both cigars are not overly, you don't get the rum and the bourbon throughout infused. It's like a light touch. They're great cigars.
Oh, the Nicaraguan, the Nicaraguan barrel age.
Yes, both.
Yeah.
And
so
the American.
Those are great. I was very close to the process of creating the American barrel age back in 2015. And that's pretty much my baby. I love that cigar. And I wish we had that one in a Churchill, but we happen to have it in a Torpedo Largo, which is a very big size, right? As you already picked up in the last 2.5 hours that we've been talking. I like longer cigars, not necessarily big ring gauge, but Churchill double Corona. And those they have very unique ways of the processing, right? We buy these old barrels, right, that have been used at least 2 times in the actually no, we get these the companies that we use Bullet Bourbon, and then Jim Beam, and there's one more that I can't recall, and we use the barrels 2 times, right? So they can so the tobacco, and we have about anywhere from 100 to 120 pounds of tobacco in there, just to give it this little hint of tobacco. So we use 1 leaf of in the filler that has been aged for 5 months in these either the bourbon ones, and the same process goes through the rum ones. Now with the rum, we use Zacapa 25 barrels, which that one we handpicked them in Nicaragua, from the Zacapa family, and I'm sorry, Flor de Caña Zacapa. We're working on something else.
I thought it was Flor de
But it's Flor de Caña 25. And those and just the process is tedious, right? Because almost every 10 days, I would say, the guys have to come in and switch the tobacco around so that the standard fermentation process that usually happens in 1,000-pound, pilones, they call it, they happen in a barrel, right? So they have to open it up and then switch the tobacco around so whatever's in the center makes it to the edges, right? So they can get the devil's cut out of the barrel. So it's a very interesting process. And my favorite part of that is, like, the guys hate me when I'm doing my tours and stuff, bring people, and it's like, oh, can we open up the barrels? Because once you open that up and you get that whiff of either rum or bourbon, it's just you really don't see that anywhere else unless you are there at the factory, right? And the smell that it has is just excellent. Out of the two, I will kind of be honest, David. My favorite one is the American barrel age.
Okay.
That is my absolute favorite one out of the two.
Well, I like them both like they're both my children. How can you like one over the other?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a combination of both would be great. And see what happens out of both. That's interesting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, just to piggyback on David there, I think one of the things that I've really liked about what Davidoff has done, whether that's Camacho or Davidoff with Winston Churchill Late Hour, is a very elegant approach to barrel aging, right? It's not like, let's just saturate this in bourbon or scotch or rum or whatever it is, but really giving a subtlety to it. And I don't know how the market reacts to that. I would imagine it's probably a positive response, because when you release a cigar that's too saturated in whiskey, it just tends to not taste very good, in my experience.
Yeah, which others have done.
I can't really remember the brands on the top of my head that have done that, that have done barrel aging.
Well, I think I don't remember which one it was. Wasn't there like a diesel? Whiskey?
Yes. Whiskey rum.
And then
another
you have
one.
Perdomo.
Yes, that's right. Perdomo barrel aged as well. Yeah. I haven't smoked any of the Perdomo. I think they make great product. I just have never gotten around to it.
But it's that will never be. I'm biased, right? Because obviously our humidors are filled with Davidoff products, from all the portfolios that we have. But like, if I go into a store, like, I've smoked Perdomos, because I when I go into a store, I don't buy our products because that I have access to, but I try different things, right? And I did try that one, and in comparison to the American barrel age, right, it was just the subtlety of that the bourbon aging, and it happens to be that one leaf of the filler instead of two, instead of three, you know what I mean? Just the balance there was quite right.
Yeah, and I remember when Late Hour came out, and I read that it was just like one leaf that was aged in the barrel.
The same. Actually, funny enough, the American barrel age is made in Dominican Republic. It's not made in Honduras.
Yeah, I remember kind of thinking to myself, well, how much is the influence actually going to be there? But it turns out it's just the right amount, which I guess logically sort of expected to actually be the right amount. But that subtlety is, I think, something that is lacking in other brands. Just speaking personally, kind of off the record, so to speak. It's not really something that I've seen go.
And that's what we wanted. We wanted, subtle taste, just a nuance, right? But not like overpowering. So they're not